The shimmering expanse of the Andromeda Galaxy stretched endlessly beyond the viewport of the research vessel Celestial Horizon. Its crew, a mix of humans and alien species, were deep into their exploratory mission, far from the familiar territories of Earth. Lieutenant Nathan Duran, a seasoned pilot and researcher, had grown accustomed to the silence of space, but today the void felt charged with anticipation. Something about the energy in the air made his pulse quicken, and his mind buzzed with a strange tension he couldn't shake. Sitting in his quarters after another long day of scans and data analysis, Nathan reclined in his chair, letting the quiet hum of the ship settle around him. He absent-mindedly flipped through his holopad, reading the daily reports when his wrist communicator beeped, pulling him from his thoughts. "Lieutenant Duran, please report to the bridge," came the voice of Captain Reyes. "We have something you need to see." Nathan frowned. The captain's voice had a tone of urgency, but also intrigued. Something unusual had been discovered. Quickly, he straightened his uniform and headed toward the bridge, his curiosity growing with each step. As he arrived, the crew members were already gathered around the central console, their faces illuminated by the faint blue glow of the data screens. Captain Reyes turned to him, nodding as Nathan took his place at the control panel. Lieutenant Reyes began, pointing to the scanner's display. "We've picked up an unidentified ship. No previous records in our database. It's not one of ours or any known alien species we've encountered." Nathan's eyes narrowed as he examined the scans. The ship, sleek and unfamiliar, hovered just outside their perimeter, completely still. Its surface gleamed in the distant starlight, and strange, intricate patterns seemed to swirl along its hull, almost as if the ship itself were alive. "What do we know about it?" Nathan asked, his voice calm but laced with anticipation. "Not much," Reyes admitted. "It's not transmitting any hostile signals, but it made contact with our systems the moment we detected it. The message it sent was odd." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Odd how?" The captain gestured to the communications officer, who tapped a few buttons, bringing up the message on the main screen. The room fell silent as the crew read the simple text. "Human, can I try that thing between your legs?" The entire bridge was quiet for a moment before whispers of disbelief rippled through the room. Nathan blinked, reading the message again, wondering if his translator implant had malfunctioned. What is this?" he muttered under his breath, his mind racing with possibilities. "Is this some kind of joke?" Reyes shook her head. "We double-checked the transmission. It's legitimate, though the wording is unusual to say the least." Nathan glanced at the captain, seeing the same bemused confusion in her eyes that he felt stirring within himself. "So what's the plan?" he asked. "Is it attempting some form of contact?" "We don't know," Reyes replied, crossing her arms. "But I'm not comfortable ignoring it. There's something strange about that ship. We can't risk it being hostile, but if it's not..." She trailed off, thinking for a moment. "We need answers. Lieutenant Duran, I want you to investigate. Take a shuttle over there, see if you can make contact with whoever or whatever is on board." Nathan hesitated. The ship's request was undeniably bizarre, but the curiosity tugging at his mind was stronger. He nodded. "Understood, Captain. I'll head over immediately." The shuttle door closed behind Nathan with a quiet hiss, sealing him into the small craft. His fingers moved swiftly over the control panel, powering up the shuttle and launching it toward the mysterious vessel. As he drew closer, the sleek design of the ship became even more mesmerizing, alien yet graceful, a symphony of curves and luminescent panels. It wasn't long before he was granted docking access. The bay doors of the alien ship opened, revealing a docking platform bathed in a soft, pulsating light. Nathan maneuvered the shuttle in, feeling a mix of excitement and unease churn in his gut. As the shuttle landed, the atmosphere seemed to shift. The air felt different, charged, alive with energy that tingled against his skin. He took a deep breath and secured his gear before stepping out onto the platform. The alien ship's interior was unlike anything he'd seen before. The walls were smooth and organic looking, almost as if they were made of a living material. Light rippled across the surfaces, moving in sync with his steps, like the vessel itself was aware of his presence. Nathan scanned the area with a handheld device, trying to detect life forms, but the readings were inconclusive. His eyes narrowed as he walked deeper into the ship. He felt watched, though no one seemed to be around. Just when he considered heading back to the shuttle, a figure appeared before him. She stepped out of the shadows with fluid grace, her movements almost otherworldly. Her skin shimmered with a pearlescent glow, and her long, silvery hair cascaded down her back. Tall and lithe, she was undeniably alien, but her form was eerily similar to a human's. Her eyes, bright, glowing violet, locked onto Nathan with an intensity that made his breath catch. "You must be the human they sent," she said, her voice a soft, melodic hum that resonated through the air. Nathan blinked, caught off guard by her appearance and the familiarity of her tone. I am, he replied, keeping his voice steady. My name is Nathan. Who are you? I am Sirah, she said, taking a step closer. I am the one who sent the message. Nathan's mind raced, piecing together the strange events leading up to this moment. You sent that message? The one asking about? Well, that request. Sirah tilted her head, as if confused by his confusion. Yes, I did. I've been studying your kind for some time. The anatomy of humans fascinates me, particularly the male form. Your species is unique compared to others I've encountered. Nathan swallowed, trying to remain composed. That was quite an unorthodox way of asking about it. Sirah smiled, a hint of amusement in her glowing eyes. I apologize if it came across as improper. My curiosity often overrides my sense of diplomacy. There was a silence between them, filled only by the soft hum of the ship. Nathan struggled to make sense of the situation. Was she genuinely interested in understanding human biology, or was this some sort of bizarre game? What exactly do you want from me? He asked carefully. Sirah took another step forward, her eyes never leaving his. I wish to understand you, Nathan. To understand humans in ways I've never been able to before. The physical body, the connection between mind and form. I've seen glimpses, but never up close, never personal. Nathan's heart raced, and his thoughts tangled. The way she spoke, the intensity in her voice, made it difficult to tell if her intentions were scientific or something more. He had dealt with alien species before, some stranger than others, but this felt different. She wasn't just seeking knowledge, there was an edge of desire in her words, an allure that stirred something inside him. Sirah, I'm not sure what you're asking of me, Nathan said, his voice low as he felt a strange pull toward her. Sirah smiled again, this time more softly. I know you feel it too, Nathan. This connection between us. It's not just curiosity, it's more than that. Her hand reached out, fingers brushing lightly against his arm, sending a spark of warmth through him. Nathan's breath hitched as the air between them thickened with unspoken tension. He could feel her presence like a magnetic force drawing him closer, her glowing eyes searching his, as if waiting for permission, waiting for him to make a choice. For a long moment he stood there, torn between duty and desire, between the unknown and the undeniable attraction that surged through his veins. I don't know if this is a good idea, he whispered, though even as he said it, he felt the pull grow stronger, harder to resist. Sirah leaned in, her voice a soft whisper against his ear. There's no need to fear, Nathan. I simply wish to explore what it means to be human with you. And in that moment, with the weight of the cosmos pressing down around him, Nathan realized that this encounter was unlike anything he had ever experienced before. The boundaries between species, between reason and passion, blurred in the space between them. And as Sirah's fingers trailed gently along his skin, he knew there was no turning back from whatever this strange, alluring connection would become. Nathan Duran leaned against the sleek, metallic wall of the celestial horizon, his thoughts wandering far from the routine duties of the mission. The research vessel had been floating in the uncharted expanses of the Andromeda Galaxy for months, a silent sentinel among the stars. Nathan had grown accustomed to the endless cycles of scanning, mapping, and cataloging distant planets, but something had changed in the past few days. There was an underlying tension in the air, something different, and it all began with the message. A week ago, the celestial horizon had intercepted a transmission. It had come from an unknown source, originating from a nearby, seemingly uninhabited sector. The message wasn't in any known language, but the ship's sophisticated AI had quickly translated it, displaying its strange content for the crew to see. The words had been simple, but they carried an inexplicable weight. Human, will you come to me? I've waited long enough. At first, the crew thought it was some kind of prank, a glitch in the system, but the source of the message couldn't be traced, and its tone, cryptic yet intimate, made everyone uneasy. For days, the ship scanned the surrounding space for signs of life, for any trace of the entity that had sent the invitation, but there was nothing. Nothing but empty stars and the cold, silent void. Captain Reyes had instructed the crew to disregard the message, to chalk it up as an anomaly and continue with the mission. But Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. Every time he closed his eyes, the words echoed in his mind, pulling him towards something just beyond his reach. Now, standing alone in one of the ship's observation decks, Nathan stared out at the vastness of space, his brow furrowed with thought. The stars glittered like distant beacons, so far away, yet each one a world of possibilities. He couldn't deny the strange pull the message had awakened in him, a curiosity that bordered on compulsion. The door to the observation deck slid open with a soft hiss, and Nathan's head snapped around. It was Lieutenant Kara, one of his crewmates and a close friend. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight knot, and her expression was as serious as ever. "Hey," she said, stepping into the room and crossing her arms. "You've been awfully quiet lately. Something on your mind?" Nathan hesitated before answering. Kara was sharp, and she'd probably seen him brooding for days. "It's that message," he finally admitted, his voice low. "I can't stop thinking about it. It feels personal, like it's meant for me." Kara's eyebrows rose slightly. "Nathan, it's just an automated transmission. We don't even know if it's targeting anyone specifically. Could be a remnant from some old alien civilization." "Maybe," Nathan said, but he wasn't convinced. There was something too deliberate about the wording, something that seemed to reach past the logical and speak directly to him. Kara studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing in concern. "Look, I know this mission's been long, and the isolation can mess with your head. But we have to stay focused. Don't let this message get to you. It's probably nothing." Nathan nodded, though the unease in his gut remained. "Yeah, you're right. I'm probably overthinking it." But even as he said the words, he knew they weren't true. Later that night, Nathan lay in his bunk, the dim lights of his quarters casting soft shadows across the walls. He stared up at the ceiling, the events of the day swirling in his mind. The mysterious message, the pull he felt deep in his chest, the unsettling sense that something was waiting for him out there in the stars. As his thoughts drifted, his wrist communicator suddenly buzzed. Nathan sat up, startled by the abrupt interruption. He glanced at the screen, expecting a routine message from the ship's command, but what he saw made his heart skip a beat. "Nathan, will you come to me? I'm waiting." It was the same message. Again, but this time his name was included, as if whoever or whatever was sending it knew exactly who he was. His pulse quickened as he sat up, staring at the words glowing on the small screen. His hand hovered over the communicator, hesitating for a moment before he tapped the message, trying to trace its origin. But like before, the source was hidden. No coordinates, no identifying markers. Just an empty signal. Nathan exhaled sharply, his mind racing. This was no coincidence. Someone or something was trying to reach him specifically. And the message was getting more insistent. Against his better judgment, Nathan grabbed his gear and headed toward the shuttle bay. He moved quickly, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. His mind was a storm of conflicting emotions, curiosity, fear, excitement, all colliding in a whirlwind of anticipation. He knew he was breaking protocol, but something deep inside urged him forward, whispering that this was a path he needed to take. The shuttle bay was quiet, the rows of small crafts lined up neatly in the dim light. Nathan approached one of the shuttles, his fingers shaking slightly as he activated the launch sequence. The hatch slid open, and he stepped inside, strapping himself into the pilot's seat. As the shuttle powered up, Nathan entered the coordinates of the last known location where the message had originated. It was far from the ship, in a region of space that wasn't marked on any star charts. A blank, uncharted sector. He hesitated for only a moment before engaging the engines, and the shuttle lifted off the deck, gliding smoothly into the inky blackness of space. The journey through the void felt both endless and fleeting. The vast emptiness surrounding him made time feel irrelevant, the boundaries between minutes and hours blurring. Nathan kept his eyes on the console, watching as the shuttle moved deeper into uncharted space. And then, without warning, his sensors picked up something. An object, a ship, large and sleek, hovered just ahead, its surface glimmering faintly in the starlight. Nathan's heart leaped into his throat. It was like nothing he'd ever seen before, a vessel that seemed to defy the laws of physics, its form fluid and almost alive. The ship pulsed with a strange energy, its exterior shifting and shimmering, as if it were part of the space around it. He brought the shuttle closer, his eyes wide with awe and trepidation. As he neared the mysterious vessel, a voice crackled over the shuttle's comm system. "Nathan," the voice whispered, soft and melodic. "You've come." Nathan's breath caught in his throat. The voice was feminine, smooth and captivating, yet it carried an undercurrent of power that sent a shiver down his spine. I'm here," he managed, his voice shaky. "Who are you?" "I am Sirah," the voice replied. "I've been waiting for you." The name sent a ripple through Nathan's mind. There was something about it, something familiar yet utterly alien. His fingers tightened on the controls as he guided the shuttle into the docking bay of the alien ship. The docking sequence completed without incident, and the hatch hissed open, allowing him to step into the unknown. The interior of the ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls were smooth, organic, and pulsing with an ethereal light that seemed to come from within the very structure itself. The air felt charged, almost alive with an energy that made his skin tingle. Nathan walked cautiously through the ship, his footsteps soft against the smooth floor. His heart pounded in his chest, every sense heightened as he moved deeper into the vessel. And then, as if summoned by his presence, she appeared. Sirah. She stood at the end of the corridor, bathed in the soft glow of the ship's light. Tall, elegant, and otherworldly, Sirah was a vision of alien beauty. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent glow, and her long silver hair cascaded down her back like liquid moonlight. Her eyes, glowing with an intense violet hue, locked onto Nathan's with a gaze that was both knowing and inviting. "You finally come," she said softly, her voice like a gentle caress. Nathan swallowed hard, his throat dry as he took in her presence. "You're the one who sent the messages." Sirah nodded, her expression serene. "I have watched your kind for a long time, Nathan. But you are different. I knew you would come." He felt a strange pull toward her, an inexplicable connection that defied logic. "Why me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sirah stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. "Because you are the one I've chosen. You and I. We are connected more than you know. I have something to show you, something you've been searching for." Nathan's heart raced, a mix of fear and curiosity swirling inside him. There was something about her, something magnetic, that made it impossible for him to turn away. "What is it?" he asked, his voice trembling with anticipation. Sirah smiled, a soft, enigmatic smile that sent a thrill through him. "Come with me, Nathan," she said, extending her hand. "I'll show you." And with that, Nathan knew there was no turning back. He reached out, his fingers brushing against hers, and the moment their hands touched, he felt a surge of energy rush through him, an energy that seemed to transcend the physical, something deeper, something beyond the boundaries of what he had ever known. The mysterious invitation had been sent, and now, Nathan would follow it to the very heart of the unknown. The dim lights of the alien ship flickered as the low hum of its engines reverberated through the narrow corridors. Nathan Duran stood in the shadowy passageway, his heart pounding in his chest. The unsettling beauty of the ship, once captivating, now felt ominous, and the weight of the silence pressed down on him. His thoughts raced as he tried to make sense of everything that had happened. Sirah had brought him aboard with an invitation he couldn't refuse, a pull that had been impossible to ignore. But now, as the euphoria of their initial connection faded, reality began to set in. There was something off about this place. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a trap, a carefully laid out plan from which there might be no escape. Sirah had led him through the labyrinth of corridors, her presence both intoxicating and unsettling. She spoke of a connection between them, something more than mere chance that had drawn him to her. But as her words echoed in his mind, Nathan felt a growing unease. Why had she singled him out? Why was he here, and what exactly did she want from him? The moment Sirah had left him alone, telling him to rest and prepare for what was to come, Nathan had felt the walls closing in around him. The ship's organic design, with its pulsing bioluminescent walls and seamless architecture, now felt less like a marvel of alien engineering and more like a cage. He was trapped in a living vessel, far from home, with no idea how to return. Nathan's hand hovered over the control panel by his door. The translucent, pulsating surface gave him no clues as to how the ship operated. He had tried earlier to find a way to communicate with the celestial horizon, but the alien technology was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It seemed designed not just to confuse, but to actively prevent any outside interference. It was as if the ship itself was conscious of his attempts to escape. He let out a breath and moved away from the panel, pacing the small room. His thoughts returned to Sirah, the strange energy she radiated, and the way her words seemed to echo in his mind long after she had left. The connection between them was undeniable, but it wasn't a bond of trust or companionship. It was something darker, something he feared was pulling him deeper into a place he didn't understand. Nathan was torn. Part of him wanted to believe that Sirah was telling the truth, that she needed him for something important, something that transcended the boundaries of species and space. But the other part of him, the one rooted in survival instinct, screamed that he was in danger. He had seen the way her eyes had flickered with an unsettling intensity, the way she had watched him with an unreadable expression, as if gauging his every move. Suddenly, the door to his quarters slid open with a soft hiss. Nathan turned sharply, his body tensing. Sirah stood in the doorway, her ethereal beauty once again filling the room with an almost tangible presence. Her silver hair seemed to shimmer in the dim light, and her violet eyes locked onto his with a quiet intensity. "Nathan," she said softly, her voice like a whisper in the dark. "I sense your unease." He didn't respond immediately, his mind racing as he tried to gauge her intentions. "Why did you bring me here?" he finally asked, his voice steady despite the knot of anxiety tightening in his chest. Sirah stepped into the room, her movements fluid and graceful. "I told you before," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "We are connected. I need your help." Nathan clenched his fists. "Help with what?" You keep talking about this connection, but you haven't explained anything. What do you want from me? For a moment, Sirah said nothing. She simply watched him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to decipher the emotions swirling inside him. Then with a sigh, she lowered her gaze, her expression softening. I need to escape, she admitted quietly. The words slipping from her lips like a confession. Nathan blinked, caught off guard. Escape, he repeated, the disbelief evident in his voice. Sirah nodded, stepping closer. This ship, it's not what you think. It's not just a vessel, it's a prison, and I've been trapped here for longer than you can imagine. Nathan's heart raced as her words sank in. A prison, he asked, his voice hushed. What do you mean? Sirah looked away, her hands clenching at her sides. I wasn't always like this, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I was once free, living among my people, exploring the stars, learning about the universe. But then they came the Watchers, as they're known among my kind. They took me along with others and brought us here. This ship, it's alive, Nathan. It's part of them, part of their control. They've bound me to it, and I can't leave. Not without your help. Nathan took a step back, his mind reeling. The Watchers? Who are they? Why would they imprison you? Sirah turned to face him again, her eyes filled with a quiet desperation. They're an ancient race, far older than anything you've ever encountered. They're not interested in life, not in the way we understand it. They see beings like you and me as nothing more than experiments, things to be studied, controlled, and discarded when we no longer serve their purpose. Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard tales of ancient godlike entities in the far reaches of space, stories whispered by veteran explorers, but he had always dismissed them as superstition. Now, standing before Sirah, hearing the pain in her voice, he couldn't help but feel that those stories might hold a terrifying grain of truth. Why me, he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why did you choose me? Sirah stepped closer, her gaze piercing into his. Because you're different, Nathan. You have something inside you, something they didn't account for. I don't know what it is yet, but I can feel it. You're the key to my freedom. Nathan's mind raced. Could she be telling the truth? Was he really the key to her escape? Or was this another manipulation, another trap in a long game he couldn't even begin to understand? How do I know you're not just using me, he asked, his voice hardening. How do I know this isn't part of some plan to keep me here forever? Sirah's eyes softened, and for the first time Nathan saw something vulnerable in her. I can't prove it to you, she admitted. All I can do is tell you the truth and ask you to trust me. I don't want to be here any more than you do. But I'm not strong enough to escape on my own. I need your help, Nathan. Please. There it was, the plea. A quiet, desperate cry for freedom. Nathan could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him, the decision that lay before him growing heavier with each passing moment. If she was telling the truth, if she really was trapped here against her will, then he couldn't just leave her. But if this was a lie, if this was all part of some grand manipulation, then he was walking straight into a nightmare. He stared at her, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. What do you need me to do, he asked, his voice betraying the uncertainty he felt. Sirah's expression softened with relief. The ship is alive, as I said. Its core is connected to the Watchers, to their control. If we can sever that connection just for a moment, we can escape. But I can't do it alone. I need you to access the ship's systems, disable the core's defenses, so I can disconnect it from them. Nathan's heart pounded in his chest. The plan sounded simple enough, but he knew it wouldn't be. Nothing about this situation was simple. Still, the thought of leaving Sirah behind, of abandoning her to this strange, living prison, was something he couldn't bring himself to do. All right, he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. I'll help you. Sirah's face lit up with gratitude, and for a moment Nathan could see the weight of her imprisonment lift from her shoulders. She reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against his hand, and he felt that strange energy between them surge again, an energy that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Thank you, she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. You don't know what this means to me. Nathan nodded, his mind already racing with the steps they would need to take. Let's get to work, he said, turning toward the door. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with danger and doubt, but he had made his choice. Together they would face whatever lay ahead. There was no turning back now. The ship's corridors were a blur of twisting metal and pulsing lights as Nathan sprinted through them, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. Behind him, the sounds of pursuit echoed, sharp metallic footfalls, the cold mechanical whir of drones closing in. The ship was alive, and it knew he was trying to escape. It wasn't just Sirah and him anymore, now the whole vessel seemed to be hunting them. Sirah was just ahead, moving with an agility and grace that seemed almost supernatural, her silver hair trailing behind her like a comet's tail. Her violet eyes flashed with determination as she urged Nathan to move faster. This way, she called over her shoulder, her voice cutting through the cacophony of alarms that blared all around them. We're almost there. Nathan's muscles burned with the strain, his lungs heaving as he forced himself to keep up. They had been running for what felt like hours, weaving through the labyrinth of hallways, dodging automated defenses and narrowly avoiding the drones that patrolled the ship. Every turn felt like a gamble, every second a battle to stay ahead of the relentless pursuit. He had never imagined that escaping the ship would be this difficult, but then again, he hadn't fully understood what he was up against. The ship wasn't just a vessel, it was a sentient, malevolent thing, connected to the Watchers in ways he still didn't fully comprehend. And now it was hunting them both, determined to stop them from severing its lifeline to the beings who controlled it. As they rounded a corner, the walls seemed to constrict, the living metal pulsing and twisting as if the ship was trying to trap them. Nathan felt a surge of panic as the passageway narrowed, leaving only a sliver of space to squeeze through. Sirah ducked into the gap without hesitation, her slender form slipping through the closing walls with practiced ease. Nathan followed, his heart hammering in his chest as he just barely made it through before the metal sealed behind him. "Come on," Nathan, Sirah urged, her voice breathless but resolute. "We don't have much time." Nathan nodded, too winded to speak, and forced his legs to keep moving. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, to rest, but he couldn't afford to. Not with the drones so close. The low hum of their engines was growing louder, a constant reminder that their escape was far from guaranteed. Sirah led them into another corridor, this one lined with bioluminescent panels that cast an eerie green glow. The light flickered, dimming for a moment before flaring back to life. Nathan's pulse quickened. The ship was reacting, adapting to their movements, trying to outmaneuver them at every turn. Up ahead, Sirah came to a sudden stop, her eyes scanning the walls with a focused intensity. "There," she whispered, pointing to a small access panel hidden in the shadows. "That's our way out." Nathan frowned, glancing back down the corridor. The sounds of pursuit were getting closer, the harsh mechanical clatter of drones echoing like a death knell. "How do we know it leads anywhere?" Sirah knelt by the panel, her fingers working quickly to pry it open. "We don't," she admitted, her voice tight with urgency. "But it's our best shot, trust me." Nathan didn't have time to argue. The moment Sirah pulled the panel free, he scrambled into the narrow crawl space, the cold metal pressing against his back as he slid inside. Sirah followed, sealing the panel behind them just as the drones rounded the corner, their searchlights sweeping across the corridor in vain. For a few moments, the only sound was their labored breathing as they crawled through the tight passageway, the walls pressing in on them like a vice. Nathan's heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. His mind raced, trying to piece together their next move. The core of the ship, their ultimate destination, was still far ahead, and every step closer felt like it was being met with resistance. But they couldn't stop now. Not when they were this close. Sirah's voice broke through the silence, low and steady. "We're going to make it, Nathan." He wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at the edges of his mind. "Are you sure? This ship, it feels like it's alive. It's learning how to trap us." Sirah glanced back at him, her violet eyes gleaming in the dim light. "It is alive, and it is learning, but we're faster. We know its weaknesses." Her confidence was infectious, and despite the fear gnawing at him, Nathan found himself nodding. "Then let's show it what we've got." They continued crawling through the passage, the walls pulsing with an almost organic rhythm, as if the ship was breathing around them. Every second felt like an eternity, the tension growing with each heartbeat. Nathan could feel the sweat trickling down his back, the weight of the chase pressing down on him like a physical force. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the passage widened into a small maintenance chamber. Sirah climbed out first, offering Nathan a hand as he pulled himself up beside her. The room was small, cluttered with alien tools and machinery, but it provided a momentary respite from the chase. Sirah moved to the control panel on the far wall, her fingers flying over the interface as she worked to disable the ship's surveillance systems. Nathan stood watch, his ears straining for any sign of the drones. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of the ship's systems. "Got it," Sirah whispered, her voice filled with quiet triumph. "We've got a few minutes before the system reboots. It's not much, but it's enough." Nathan nodded, his muscles tensing as the reality of what they were doing sank in. "Let's make them count." With one final glance at each other, they prepared to face whatever the ship had left in store for them. The chase wasn't over, but in this moment, they had gained a precious advantage. Together, they would see it through, no matter what lay ahead. The air was thick with tension as the emergency lights flickered overhead, casting the narrow corridors of the ship in a sickly red glow. Nathan could feel his heart hammering in his chest as he and Sirah moved swiftly through the labyrinthine passages, their footsteps echoing against the cold metal floors. Each step felt like it brought them closer to salvation or disaster. The ship was alive with a furious hum, every system reacting to their presence, trying to contain them. They were running out of time. "Keep moving," Sirah urged, her voice low but sharp, her violet eyes flashing with determination. "We're almost at the hangar." Nathan nodded, pushing aside the growing exhaustion that weighed down his limbs. His mind was a blur of adrenaline, fear, and the relentless drive to survive. Escape felt like a distant dream, just out of reach, but Sirah's unwavering resolve gave him the strength to push forward. Her alien grace was mesmerizing, even in the midst of chaos, and he couldn't help but draw strength from her presence. She was as focused as ever, her movements fluid and controlled, like a predator stalking prey, always aware of the danger lurking just behind them. The ship wasn't just hunting them anymore, it was hunting them with intent. The Watchers were no longer content to observe from a distance now, they were closing in, and Nathan could feel it in the very walls around him. The living ship's pulse had quickened, the once subtle thrum of its systems now a deafening roar, as if it were a beast whose patience had finally snapped. Up ahead, Sirah suddenly stopped, raising her hand to signal silence. Nathan froze, his breath catching in his throat. For a moment, the only sound was the distant hum of machinery, but then, faintly, came the unmistakable metallic clatter of drone footsteps echoing down the hall. "They're here," Sirah whispered, her eyes narrowing. Nathan's pulse spiked as his mind raced. The drones, vicious, relentless, and programmed to kill on sight, were closing in fast. They didn't have much time before the ship's deadly enforcers descended on them. They needed to move, but any wrong step now could lead straight into a trap. Sirah turned toward a junction in the corridor, her keen senses scanning the surroundings. She gestured toward a side passage, her eyes locking with Nathan's. "This way, quickly." They slipped into the narrow passage, moving with practiced efficiency. The walls seemed to close in around them, the air stifling and heavy. Nathan's mind flashed with images of the drones, cold, the motionless machines equipped with energy rifles, scanning for any sign of life. The memory of their lethal accuracy was still fresh in his mind from the first time he'd encountered them. They reached a larger junction, the hangar just beyond. The door was in sight, a massive airlock that led to freedom, but something was wrong. Sirah stopped abruptly, her hand shooting out to stop Nathan. "Wait," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Nathan's breath caught as he followed her gaze. At the far end of the corridor, just outside the hangar door, a pair of drones stood guard. Their sleek, black forms were motionless, but their scanning sensors glowed with an ominous red light, sweeping the area with ruthless precision. "We'll never make it through without being seen," Nathan muttered, frustration biting at him. Sirah's eyes narrowed as she considered their options. Her mind worked quickly, analyzing the situation. "We'll have to create a distraction," she said softly, already scanning their surroundings for anything they could use. Nathan glanced around, his eyes landing on a maintenance hatch just a few meters away. "What about the ventilation system? Could we use it to get to the hangar without being detected?" Sirah hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the drones. "It's risky," she admitted, "but it might be our only chance." With no other options, they made their way to the hatch, the sound of their movements barely audible above the low hum of the ship. Sirah worked quickly, prying the hatch open with a tool from her belt, and they climbed inside the narrow duct. The metal was cold against Nathan's skin as he crawled through the cramped space, the sound of their breathing loud in the enclosed space. The drone's footsteps echoed faintly through the walls, growing louder as they approached. Nathan's heart raced as they crawled deeper into the duct, the metallic clank of the drone sending shivers down his spine. It was a dangerous gamble. If they were discovered now, there would be no escape. They reached the end of the duct, where a small grill allowed a view of the hangar below. Nathan could see the ship and escape pod, sleek and fast, waiting for them. His pulse quickened with hope, but his heart sank as he spotted another group of drones patrolling the hangar floor. "We can't stay here," Sirah whispered, her voice strained. "We have to move." Nathan nodded, swallowing the rising fear in his throat. This was it, their last chance. In one swift motion, Sirah pushed the grill open and dropped into the hangar, moving with the grace of a predator. Nathan followed, landing quietly beside her. For a moment they stood still, barely breathing as the drones continued their patrol, oblivious to their presence. They inched forward, staying low, using the shadows for cover as they approached the escape pod. Just as they reached the ship, a sharp, high-pitched alarm pierced the air. The drones froze, their sensors flaring as they locked onto the intruders. "Go," Sirah shouted, shoving Nathan toward the pod. The drones whirred to life, their weapons powering up with a menacing hum. Nathan scrambled into the pod, his heart pounding in his ears as Sirah followed, sealing the door behind them. The sound of gunfire echoed through the hangar as the drones unleashed a volley of shots. But it was too late. The pod's engines roared to life, and with a deafening rush, they shot out into the void of space. Nathan slumped back in his seat, his breath ragged, his body shaking with the aftershock of adrenaline. They had done it, they had escaped. But as he glanced over at Sirah, her face illuminated by the cold glow of the ship's controls, he knew that their journey was far from over. The chase was behind them, but the real danger, the unknown that lay ahead, was just beginning. The cold, metallic walls of the ship hummed softly, a constant reminder of the alien environment Nathan had found himself in. Seated across from him in the dimly lit cabin was Sirah, her violet eyes reflecting the soft glow of the control panel, her expression distant yet unreadable. The adrenaline of their escape still lingered in the air, but now, in the quiet aftermath, something else began to fill the space between them, an unspoken connection, fragile but undeniable. Nathan had known Sirah for only a short time, yet the intensity of their shared experience had forged a bond unlike anything he had ever felt before. She was an enigma to him, this alien woman with her fierce intelligence and unwavering resolve. Everything about her, from her sleek, lithe form to the quiet strength that radiated from her, both fascinated and unsettled him. He had never expected to find himself in this situation, much less to trust an alien so completely. But here they were, two unlikely fugitives bound together by circumstance. Sirah glanced at him, her sharp gaze softening for a moment before she spoke. "You did well back there," she said, her voice low and measured. Most humans would have panicked. Nathan couldn't help but let out a dry chuckle, the tension easing just a little. "Trust me, I came close," he replied, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "But I guess when your life's on the line, you find ways to push through." She nodded, her lips curving into a brief, almost imperceptible smile. "You're stronger than you realize," she said quietly, her gaze lingering on him for a beat longer than necessary before she turned back to the controls. Nathan watched her, feeling an odd warmth settle in his chest. For all her cold exterior, Sirah had shown him a side of herself that few, if any, probably ever saw. She wasn't just the hardened, strategic operative she appeared to be. Beneath that steely resolve was someone who cared, someone who had risked everything to protect him, a mere human. "I wouldn't have made it without you," he admitted after a moment of silence, his voice soft. "You saved my life more than once." Sirah didn't respond immediately, her fingers gliding over the control panel with practiced ease. But after a moment she glanced back at him, her expression unreadable. "It wasn't just your life on the line," she said. "I couldn't let them win." Her words carried weight, but there was something deeper beneath them, something she wasn't saying. Nathan had sensed it from the moment they met, that Sirah was running from something far more personal than the mission. He wanted to ask, to understand the truth behind the layers she kept hidden, but he knew better than to push too hard. Trust was something that had to be earned, and in the short time they had known each other, they had only just begun to scratch the surface. For now, though, they had an unspoken understanding. They were both survivors, both willing to fight for their freedom, even if the odds were stacked against them. "You know," Nathan said, leaning back in his seat, "I never imagined I'd be sitting in an alien ship, running from a galactic authority with someone like you." Sirah raised an eyebrow, amusement flickering in her eyes. "And what do you mean by someone like me?" He grinned, feeling more at ease now that the danger had passed. "At least for the moment. I mean, you're different. Not just because you're, well, from another planet, you're tough, smarter than most people I've met, and yet." His voice trailed off and he shrugged, suddenly unsure how to finish the thought. And yet what Sirah pressed, her tone curious now, though still guarded. Nathan hesitated, feeling the weight of her gaze on him. "And yet, you care. More than you let on." Sirah didn't respond immediately. Her expression shifted, and for the first time, Nathan saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. It was fleeting, gone in a heartbeat, but it was there. "Maybe," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But caring can be dangerous. It can make you weak." Nathan shook his head. "I don't believe that. Caring is what makes us strong. It's why we fight, why we survive. Without it, what's the point?" Sirah looked at him then. Really looked at him, and for a moment, the walls she had built around herself seemed to waver. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but then closed it again, her eyes drifting back to the controls. "I used to think like you," she murmured, her voice distant, as though she were speaking to herself more than to him. "But things are different out here. You have to be careful who you trust." "I trust you," Nathan said simply, his words carrying a weight that made Sirah turn back to him, her eyes wide with surprise. He hadn't meant to say it, but now that the words were out, he realized they were true. Despite everything, despite the danger, the uncertainty, he trusted her. Maybe it was foolish, maybe it was naive, but he had seen the way she had fought for him, the way she had risked her life to save him. That kind of loyalty, that kind of connection, was rare. Sirah stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly she nodded, a quiet acceptance in her eyes. Maybe she said softly, "You're not so different from me after all." In that moment, something shifted between them. It wasn't just the relief of surviving or the shared adrenaline of the chase. It was a bond, fragile but real, built on trust and forged in the fires of danger. They were no longer just two strangers trying to survive, they were allies, bound together by fate and circumstance. As the ship hummed quietly around them, Nathan and Sirah sat in silence, their thoughts intertwined in a way that words could never fully express. They didn't know what the future held, but for now they had each other. And that was enough.